Welcome to the Moxie OT podcast, where we invite occupational therapy practitioners, consumers, and friends of OT to talk about evidence-based practice. Today we'll be talking to Dr. Jessica Weiler about pediatric mental health. Jessica is an occupational therapist and owner of Thrive Therapy LLC, a mobile OT practice that provides services for children and their families in Madison, Wisconsin. Let's meet Jessica. Today on the Moxie OT podcast, we'll be talking with Dr. Jessica Weiler about pediatric mental health. Jessica is an occupational therapist and owner of Thrive Therapy LLC, a mobile OT practice that serves children and their families. I met Jessica when we were both doctoral students. We had a lot of fun working together on some pretty interesting group projects. Thanks for joining us today on the Moxie OT podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
That's great. I'm excited too. So Jessica, you're still a relatively new OT, but you've accomplished a lot. I know you've been focused on pediatric mental health for some time. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you came to start Thrive Therapy?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first learned about the profession of occupational therapy, it was in the context of observing at a residential school in Chicago. And many of those students had trauma backgrounds or were labeled as quote unquote behavior kids. So with that really being like my introduction to OT, it really did inform my OT approach to always include relationship building and supporting kids where they're at. And of course, during the OT master program, I thought everything that OT was doing in every setting was just like the coolest. But surprisingly, I found my initial passion serving within a school, which I really didn't anticipate because I thought school was just for handwriting. I thought it would be too restrictive. But that's where I ended up for about 3.5 years. The school system that I worked in really supported the role of OTs in school. So I was able to set up different sensory supports, which included putting together some sensory rooms in different programs to support students and staffs in staying regulated throughout the day so that they could learn. And so kind of on that path, it led me to the doctoral program and seeking out more knowledge and clinical practice specific to pediatric mental health. And so for my doctoral project, I developed this resource guide for OTs working in schools that would provide them with the resources to promote mental health. And that's just because I feel like this is an ideal role for OTs, but there's limited time to research. So I wanted to provide something organized, accessible, that had some free resources as a starting point for maybe new grads, maybe an OT working in another setting that was looking to work in schools, or even OTs who have been working in the school setting that aren't really sure how they can promote mental health. So I really loved that job. But life happens, and January 2020, I ended up moving to Madison, Wisconsin. Fast forward through the pandemic. Side note, I've always had this dream of maybe one day owning a farm and just turning that into like a therapy nature space. And I've been talking about this for years and years. And so finally I found this course specific to OTs with all the steps of how to open up a cash-based private practice. And I was like, okay, here we go, let's do this. So Thrive Therapy LLC came to be. And my dream is to provide a strengths-based approach for families who need intervention in their home and in the community.
That's so great. I love so much of your story. I think it's just really exciting to look at what you've already done, to think about how you used sensory spaces in the schools to not only support the students, but the staff as well. Is so inclusive and really speaks to how we all need to be taking care of our sensory systems.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I guess that demonstrates your leadership. And your resource, what do we call that? Resource guide.
Yeah.
It speaks to all of those things that I hear from clinicians all the time, how hard it is to find the resources and the research when you're not in school
Yeah.
and you don't have access to the library anymore, or that just time, you want to have a life too.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
and and I also hear that question from OTs all the time too, like, how do I transition? We've always talked about all the different roles OTs can have, and
Yes.
how could I transition? And to provide a resource that really would help someone facilitate that transition is awesome. So kudos to all your
Thank
accomplishments
you.
already. And
Thank you
now
so
you're starting a business. It's amazing. So can you tell us a little bit more about, now that you're not in the schools, who are the clients that you're serving? What diagnoses do you see?
Yeah, so I've actually had the opportunity to work with babies up to adults. And so really with this new business, I am looking to kind of focus more on that birth to elementary age children and their families. Um, and I would say some of those common diagnoses would be ADHD, autism, anxiety, depression, panic disorder, PTSD, bipolar, and sensory processing disorder.
Wow, that's a vast list of quite a variety of folks that you serve. What is it? I think you talked a little bit, but is there something that's really motivating to you about working with this population?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really is about that connection that you can make with your client. And especially when you know that they've already had a hard history, but they're so open and willing to engage with you is just awesome. Or really seeing them succeed and you see their strengths and you're able to support them in the things that they want to do. And I feel that same way about families too. I love working with families who just need the strategies and tools, and once they have them and they feel empowered, you just kind of see that spark.
Yeah, and sometimes it can be something so simple, and the family's like, I can't believe we never thought about this before. But that's why OT's there, to help provide those strategies, and um, then they can feel much more empowered to move forward and try this.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah,
so great.
exactly.
So I know that you're a certified trauma and resilience practitioner. Can you tell us what that certification means and how it's affected your practice?
Yeah, so I got that certification through an organization called Star Commonwealth, and they are located in a small town in Michigan called Albion. And I went to undergrad at Albion College. Shout out Brits. So my senior year, I was able to observe the OT working there. And so obviously that's kind of been a piece of my OT history. So I think after graduating OT school, I was looking for more ways to further my knowledge in trauma informed care. And so in that journey, I went on STAR's website and saw that they were offering this certification course. And I thought, that sounds like it would be really helpful and relevant to the population that I was looking to serve. And that certification really confirmed a lot for me. It's not OT specific, but is definitely appropriate for OTs. It highlighted the physiological responses in the body to trauma, the neuroscience, the developmental effects, and what that means for learning. And then there was even a course that was structured sensory interventions. So I think my big takeaway from that certification is that OTs are uniquely qualified to address trauma because trauma is a sensory experience.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that that's one of OT's unique, uh, one of OT's distinct and unique abilities is that we're able to address both that mind-body connection, that sensory connection, and it's that really that holistic approach that we bring to the table that no other profession does. So I think it's really we undervalue ourselves, and I'm
Yes.
really excited to speak to more OTs that are stepping up to the plate and providing these services for our clients.
Yeah, I mean it's that empowerment like we talked about. Once you feel comfortable and you kind of have that knowledge, like we can make a huge difference in pediatric mental health and mental health in general, but it's
Yeah.
awesome.
So speaking to that, what are some of the typical needs that you see in your clients? What kind of interventions do you do?
Yeah, so I think typical needs can really range, but definitely like supporting that regulation, supporting participation across settings. A lot of times that relates to school. There's a very different set of demands at school. And I would say a lot of teaching caregivers how to de escalate, how to co regulate. And so right now I'm actually heavily using Kelly Mahler's interoception curriculum. I think sometimes when we think about mental health, we might jump right into like, oh, they don't have the coping skills. And with interoception, it really takes that foundational step back and says, okay, like, how does your body feel in various experiences? And one example can be if a child misses these early building signs that they're hungry, and all of a sudden they don't feel it until it's like very, very strong and they need to eat right now, you might only see that piece of the behavior that's like a meltdown because they have to wait for their food, or their parent is talking through options and they just kind of need food. So if we were to just focus on the intervention of like, let's wait, we could really be inadvertently telling that child to like shut down those feelings. But if we really address more awareness in the body and picking up on those early body signals, we're really building a skill that is essential and applies to a variety of situations across settings. So I really, really like that curriculum and pulling pieces of it and kind of going from there.
I love that. I think it speaks again to our ability to look at that mind body connection and then apply it to participation, right? And, how can a family engage in whatever activity is going on so prior to that meltdown, but then also meal planning and those things. If the breakdown's happening while mom's trying to get the food onto the table, then there's that
Mm-hmm.
heightened stress in the whole household. So
Mm-hmm.
um
Yeah.
it's yeah, I'm hearing more and more about OTs using the interoception approach, and it's pretty exciting.
Yes.
um So I think we've been talking about this whole discussion. The next question on my paper is, what is it that OT brings to pediatric mental health that's unique from other professions? Is there
Yeah.
anything else we wanted to add in there?
I was thinking about this kind of from what's important to promote for mental health. And I think we value relationship building at the core. And we understand that our clients need to feel safe in order to engage at all. Even if it's just socially with us, there has to be that trust and safety. We're client centered and occupation focused, and we make those meaningful for our families. Um, and I think too, we bring that unique lens of we review and use research, right? And we want that evidence based practice. And we can really take that and educate on all of those benefits of that come out of engaging in occupation that support mental health and wellness. So I kind of think of like, what can't we do to support mental health?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it really comes back to, using the evidence to support that participation in occupation. And it's not just about being able to regulate and not be a child running around, but being able to regulate so that you can do the things that the kid wants to do or the family wants to do. And I think that's really unique to maybe another profession that might be more focused on, sitting still in the classroom or paying attention.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what kinds of assessments do you use when you're working with these kids and families?
I'm definitely using the comprehensive assessment of interoceptive awareness that Kelly Mahler developed. They have a really good caregiver survey that's helpful. I'm still using the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure, especially when I have like adolescent teen clients. I really want them to have buy-in to what we're doing. So I like the structure of the COPM. Through the certification course, I have access to this body awareness questionnaire, and it's a 20 question short survey from the client's perspective that does ask some questions that overlap with interoception, and I love it. And then, of course, the sensory processing measure and the sensory profile as well. I'm sure there's other ones, but I do a lot of informal assessment as well.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's a lovely list to help people kind of get started if they wanted to get more into this space. I think that's really helpful. And the COPM comes up again and again on this podcast, and we will have someone come in and talk about it specifically. Eventually, I'm working on it.
Awesome.
But yeah, that's definitely one of my favorites, even though I'm in the adult neuro space. It's always amazing to me how just that simple interview kind of brings out more of those occupations for folks. Is there specific aspects about working in this space more challenging?
Yeah, so I find it challenging when you're collaborating on a team and you're trying to get on the same page with other professionals, but they're using a compliance focused approach. Or sometimes there's families that have that point of view as well. And from the OT lens, I want to enable clients. I want to empower them. I want to build those skills so that eventually they don't need us. And so really that challenge kind of looks like, how can I communicate effectively with my approach and provide evidence in a way that the team or the family can understand and really get on board with.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge for a lot of OTs in a lot of settings, is first kind of communicating what it is that I'm talking about as an OT.
Yes.
Either the OTPF doesn't always translate to other professions. Talking about interoception can be difficult to communicate with other professions. So I think that developing our communication skills is such an important part of both with other professionals and with families.
Definitely. And there's always the challenge of systems, right? Getting services to those kids that really need it is tricky. Many clients would benefit from services in their homes or in the community, but it might not be covered by insurance, right? So there's that financial barrier. There are exceptions depending on your state. They might use a waiver system, but a lot of times even then, there's restrictions that might focus solely on like caregiver training, or it has to tie to daily living skills. So, OTs can really be flexible in this sense and kind of take advantage of some of those systems available, but it is something that is a challenge accessing this population.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that we need more robust forms of reimbursement.
Yes.
So that we're not having to how are families supposed to navigate this waiver system when like OTs barely understand it? And how can there are some really great private pay options out there for folks, but we know not everybody can access that. And if the pediatric clinic in town is across town and transportation's an issue. There's just so many barriers. So definitely room for more advocacy.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Do you have a success story you'd like to share with us?
Yeah. So this would actually be my time in the schools, and for a majority of my time, I would be in this particular school that housed a special education program for students that might qualify under the labels of emotional disability, autism, or other health impairment that's might have been like an ADHD diagnosis. Um, so year one, I applied for this district grant for a school garden, and it was accepted. And it honestly took until my last year for the garden to fully come to fruition. It involved collaborating with a lot of the school staff. We even had someone come up from, I think, University of Illinois and taught some of our students about composting and the importance of worms. But eventually we did get that garden built, and the students were a huge part of it. And I got to see teachers integrated into their lessons, or, it provided like a really good break space. And so it's just really cool to think that that garden's still there and it's going to be there even though I'm not there. But accomplishing that was a huge success for me, and really just another example of how OTs can promote mental health in the schools.
Yeah, that's so great. We there's so much focus right now on sensory rooms, but what about a sensory garden or even just a space that is a different sensory experience than the classroom? And kudos to you, in your first year there to apply for a grant. I think often we feel like, oh, I've got to wait till I have more experience or I've taken coursework on grant writing or something. But sometimes it's just best to learn by doing and jump in and do something. So I'm really impressed by your ability to do that. And, and your honesty in that it took 3 years to get it all together. Because I think we need to have some patience with ourselves and understand that that's kind of the process that things go sometimes.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. So I hope that's very inspiring to me. I hope it inspires some other OTs to take on some of those creative projects.
Yeah.
So Jess, at the Moxie OT podcast, we always want to make sure we provide an opportunity for our listeners to increase their Moxie. So if a clinician wanted to know more about serving the pediatric mental health population, what resources would you recommend they check out?
Yeah, I think clinicians out there should really increase their moxie by stepping into that advocacy role. Our OT profession was founded in mental health, and so we need to be a presence in order to make effective change. And I think in a large part this includes disability advocacy because mental health stigma is real, and it affects access to services, it delays individuals getting help sooner, and it can be self stigmatizing for people and they can internalize a negative self view. So if we're out there and we're proponents of it and we're disability advocates, that can really, really make a big change. As far as resources, childmind.org puts out mental health reports, really nice comprehensive research surveys, and I highly suggest checking out their edition related to school to prison pipelines. And if you're looking up other professionals, I would say look up Ross Green, Dan Siegel, Tina Payne Bryson, Greg Santucci, Deb Dana, if you're interested in exploring polyvagal theory, Mona Delahook, and Susan Cahill.
Those are great resources, and we'll make sure we post links to them on the website. And I really like that you were thinking about advocacy and how OTs can really be advocates. And I would throw in that getting involved in your state organization is a great way to find other advocates to partner with and get involved in advocacy efforts.
Yes. Yes. And if I can advocate for myself for a minute,
Yes.
You can find me at thrivetherapyot.com. I'm providing direct services, one-on-one OT, but also getting some community-based groups started in June. And I'm also hoping to revamp my OTD project and provide OTs with some resources to promote pediatric mental health in the near future. But if you're interested in a copy of my resource guide, you can email me at jessicaweiler@thrivetherapyot.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, and on Facebook I have a group, OTs for Pediatric Mental Health, if you want to come on over and join us.
That's so great. Thanks for all of those resources, and they'll be up on the website as well. Thanks for
Awesome.
talking with us
Thank you.
today, Jessica.
Thank you so much. This is great.
Thanks for joining us for this great conversation with Dr. Jessica Weiler on pediatric mental health. As I was preparing for this interview, I really enjoyed reading a systematic review by Cahill et al. That provided support for occupation-based interventions to support mental health and participation in children. This systemic review found moderate to strong evidence for the use of yoga and sports and moderate evidence for the use of play and arts. These results reflect the importance of interventions that address the mind-body connection. This article demonstrates how powerful OT's role in pediatric mental health can be. Our education and background perfectly position us to help kiddos improve that mind-body connection, leading to improved ability to participate in all of their daily activities. We'll have links to this article and all of the resources Jessica provided on the Moxie OT website. If you want to be a part of the conversation, leave us your email address at moxieot.com. We're on all of your favorite social media channels as well. Please like and subscribe so others can join the conversation. The Moxie OT podcast was recorded in our home in the Avondale neighborhood of Chicago. This episode was produced by Brian Zira. Our intro music is courtesy of 13 Taco Studio. Technical assistance was provided by our dog Brody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.